Monday morning to you. Today I'm going to teach you a little bit about static and dynamic characters in literature, as well as protagonists and antagonists. Now, in talking to Mrs. Gubo, she said that you guys already learned about protagonists and antagonists last year, so you should be experts, but I will review it. And then I'm also going to teach you something new, static and dynamic characters in literature. And then at the end of the day today, hopefully you can identify some of our characters in Tuck Everlasting as the protagonists, the antagonists, the static characters, and the dynamic characters, okay? So let's go over this. It's just like you guys being in the classroom, and I'm up here at the smartboard. So let's go through this really quickly here. These are the types of characters we're going to learn about today. Protagonists, antagonists, static, and dynamic characters, okay? All right, so to start, let's go with the protagonists, okay? So if you see here, we have the prefix pro, and if you remember, that means you're for something. So the protagonist is that person that you are always trying to support and you are for in the book or the movie. So typically the protagonist is going to be your central or main character, okay? And the leading figure in the novel. A protagonist is often called kind of like the hero, or you might hear be called the good guy by the audience or the readers. Now, just because I said good guy doesn't mean it has to always be a guy. Just the good guy in the book, like the person that's doing the right things and trying to do what's good, right? The hero in the book. So, for example, if you guys have seen Toy Story, we can definitely say that Woody is the protagonist in that particular story, right? We're cheering for him. He's the hero. We want him to succeed. The antagonist, I know in the first Toy Story, the antagonist would be that crazy, ugly, scary kid named Sid, right? He would be the antagonist. We'll get to antagonists in a minute. But Woody would be the protagonist in that particular movie. Now, I want you to take a minute and think about any other books that you're reading, maybe your AR book that you're reading right now. What's the protagonist in that book that you're reading? And maybe some other protagonists in movies that you can think of that you've been watching over this quarantine, right? So see if you can think of any protagonists. I can think of like Simba in The Lion King, definitely the one you are rooting for. Cinderella, going on a Disney theme today, guys. All those people would be considered protagonists. Think about our novel Long Walk to Water, right? Obviously, I have that one right here. Do you remember this one? Okay. This one right here, think about who would the protagonist be in this book. Waiting. Salva, right? Salva would be your protagonist, the person you are cheering for in the book to succeed, okay? So that is a protagonist. Let's move on to antagonist. Antagonist is the character or force in the story who keeps the main character or the protagonist from getting what he or she wants. The antagonist is often a bad guy in the story. Remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be a guy, but the guy that's kind of the bad guy. It's the one who's stopping the protagonist from getting what they want, right? It's the person or the thing that is kind of stopping the protagonist from succeeding, okay? It's oftentimes what causes that conflict in the book. When we talked about the different types of conflict, the antagonist comes in and kind of causes the conflict for the protagonist, okay? So think about any antagonist you can talk about. I just talked about Sid from Toy Story. If you remember him, he's always kind of destroying toys, doing horrible toy experiments. He would be considered the antagonist in Toy Story. Think of the AR book you're reading right now. Who would be considered the antagonist? Think about Harry Potter, right? Voldemort, definitely an antagonist. Think about Hatchet, right? In Hatchet, what would be the antagonist? Now think about this for a minute. In Hatchet, we don't actually have a person that's the antagonist. The antagonist in that book is actually going to be like nature, right? You have the tornado that Mother Nature brings. You have the moose. You have all those things that Mother Nature brings upon Brian and makes Mother Nature is actually the antagonist in that book, okay? So other antagonists that I can think of, for sure, if we think about Disney movies, if you've ever seen, Mulan, right? That's a good one. The Huns, who are attacking China, those would be the antagonists in that particular movie. Think about Cinderella, it would be the evil stepmom, right? She's for sure an antagonist in that story. So think of some other antagonists, and I think in your notes you'll have a little something to do with that. All right, so that's a review. Hopefully you already know that. Let's go ahead and move on to a little review here. Remember, protagonist, often the main character and considered the good character in the book. Tends to be the one that succeeds in the book. Remember, the prefix pro means to be in favor of something, so we root for the protagonist. Example, Dora from Dora the Explorer movie, Peter Pan, right? That makes sense. Over here we have antagonist, often the bad character in the book, movie, whatever. Prevents the hero from succeeding. That's kind of the definition. Anti, we know, means to work against. A prefix anti, work against. The antagonist is working against the protagonist. Swiper no swiping in Dora the Explorer would be considered an antagonist, and Captain Hook in the movie Peter Pan is the antagonist. Okay, so that should be a good review of protagonists and antagonists, but let's go ahead and look at static versus dynamic characters. So, static characters. Some of you maybe don't know what this is. Way back in the day when we used to have TVs, if you lost connection in your TV, it would turn to static, right? It looked like this. And your screen would look exactly the same until the connection came back. So static characters, I want you to think of static on the TV. A character who is static is a character that remains primarily the same throughout the story. Events in the story do not change a static character's outlook or personality, motivation, etc. I'm not talking about looks, okay? Like how the character looks, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about internal changes, things inside of them. Their beliefs, their habits, their personality does not change throughout the story. They stay the same the whole time. Now, static characters aren't always bad characters. Sometimes you'll see the antagonist, oftentimes, is static, but not always. So static characters can be good and they can be bad. It just depends on, did the character change? Did their morals, their thoughts, did they go through a big change in the book or the movie? Okay? So that's what we can kind of think about with static characters. I think my example for static characters I'm going to use is in Shrek, okay? In the movie Shrek, the static characters. So we'll come back to some examples. Think about maybe in a book, a static character that you can think of. Okay? Think about it. Think about it. One example I could give you is from our book, Ungifted. If you remember Noah, one of our favorite characters from Ungifted, he did not really change the entire story, right? He was kind of crazy nerd alert from the beginning, same kind of crazy nerd alert dude at the end. He had the same inner thoughts, right, where he wanted to fail from the beginning to the end. Noah did not go through many changes. Now, Donovan's a different story. But in this book, I definitely think you could use Noah as an example of a static character who stays the same, okay? So that's a good example of a character that is a good character but stays the same throughout. But obviously you have a lot of antagonists who are considered static, like in Shrek, Lord Farquaad. We get to him in a minute here. Let's talk about dynamic characters. I actually have my softball team do something called a dynamic stretch. Dynamic stretching is when they're constantly on the move and they're changing their positions, right? So like they're constantly moving while they're stretching and changing their positions. So it makes sense. Dynamic character is a character that experiences an important change throughout the story or novel. Changes are internal. They happen inside. Again, it's not how they look. It happens inside, such as their values, opinions, understandings, and insights. So here is the perfect example of a dynamic character, the Grinch, right? From beginning to end, the Grinch changes tremendously. He hates the Who's, he hates Christmas, he hates everything about being with other people. At the end, we know that drastically changes. He loves Christmas, he loves the Who's, he lives down there with them happily ever after, right? So a dynamic character would definitely be considered the Grinch, right? Let's go back to this. Donovan, changed character from beginning to end. Think about it, right? Troublemaker, always causing trouble, didn't care about school, didn't like his sister, didn't care to help his sister. At the end, he helps the gifted kids. He cares about them. He wants them to succeed, right? Still a little bit of a troublemaker, but not as much. Okay, Salva, major dynamic character, okay? Changes from beginning to end quite a bit, all right? Because of the experiences he went through. All right, so let's look at my other example here. Static, this is Lord Farquaad, right? Character stays the same. Shrek, One of my favorite movies. Character that changes due to the events in the story. Shrek definitely changes. So this is all on your notes page. Shrek is also the protagonist. He's a dynamic character because he changes throughout the story. He becomes a softer character, and he lets people into his life. He likes to be with people. He loves Fiona, right? So he is considered a dynamic character. Then you have Lord Farquaad. Remember him? Oops, not him, sorry. Lord Farquaad, I have a picture on your notes. He stays the same throughout. He always wants to kill ogres, and he tries to keep Shrek apart from Fiona, so he would be considered an antagonist, and also he would be considered a static character, Lord Farquaad. Think about Donkey for a minute. Would Donkey be a protagonist or antagonist? Answer is protagonist. Would Donkey be static or dynamic? The answer is actually static. If you think about it, Donkey doesn't really change from beginning to end. Donkey is Donkey the whole story, right? He's the same silly, goofy dude who makes a lot of jokes, cares about people from the beginning, same thing in the end, right? All right, so I'm going to do a couple here. I'm going to let you think. Jafar from Aladdin. Static, dynamic, protagonist, antagonist. Think about it. Jafar, he's definitely an antagonist. And I would say he is static throughout the whole movie. Oh yes, look at them biceps. How about this guy right here from Beauty and the Beast? Gaston. Gaston, we would say, is a antagonist. And he is static or dynamic? Static throughout the movie. He doesn't change. Okay, the Beast. I think this one is on your notes page. Think about the Beast. Static or dynamic? Does the Beast change from beginning to end? Think about it. Answer it on your notes. Dory. She's also on your notes, I believe. Static or dynamic? Does she change from beginning to end, or is she the same old Dory pretty much throughout the whole movie? Oh gosh, I'm not much of a Marvels person, but how about this guy right here? Static, dynamic. Definitely think he's a protagonist. I don't know. You'll have to decide that one on your own. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and post another video as well, so you can watch this one and that one, and hopefully you have a great understanding. Protagonist, antagonist, static, and dynamic characters. And then today, I'm going to have you think about our characters from Tuck Everlasting, right? Winnie, Jessie, May, Angus, the man in the yellow suit, Miles. Are they static or are they dynamic characters? So think about that today as you complete that assignment. See you later.